All right, guys. So the previous video I was talking about who you are. Do you decide who you are or do you explore it? Well, right now I'm going to talk about something. I'm going to talk about the ego. I talked a lot about the ego back then. I talked about the self pertaining the ego. In this video, I'm going to try to do the opposite. I'm going to talk about the ego from the self's perspective. What do I mean by extracting the self, the true self, your true self that's hidden? I used an example about how people felt about themselves at different stages in life. And what are the things they would consider as in, like, yay, this is something I would want to change about myself, and this is something I wouldn't. But the ego is very much buildable. And who constructs it other than you? Who are you? If the ego is either a construction of yourself or a construction of your environment, or it doesn't exist. Again, now Buddhists say that we have to destroy the ego. I agree, but I also agree we could want an ego that's okay. Let's go into spirituality at the very least, in order for us to kind of like dissect when people say leave the ego, break the ego, let go of the ego. When they say let go of the ego, your experience on this earth kind of is strengthened the way they explain it. You get to be calm, you get to be collected, you don't get to react. Basically, you heal as your ego kind of like dissipates. You heal. But that's the ego that was built by the environment. Now, an actual teacher that looks at me and is trying to teach me something, even though he's calm and healed, he's speaking to me from the position of teacher. But isn't that ego as well? And it feels like you kind of have to have a firm grasp on who you are representing to this world by letting go of everything that represents you. And let me repeat this. You have to have a firm grasp of who you are representing to this world by letting go of everything that represents you. Because ultimately, instead of projecting the outside world in, I have to be projecting the inside world out. In the previous video, when I was discussing how we will be able to kind of like extract the self, I have no idea. I literally every day I wake up and I decide to do more, to do something towards what I chose to be my goal. And that goal of mine can only be achieved if I change. I don't change. The way I interact with people changes. The way I think changes. The way I process the outside world and the environment changes. The way I study changes. The way I work changes. Everything about me changes. But I don't. I'm still the same person basically handling this creation. I'm the same, I don't even want to say person. I think I'm the same spirit, consciousness, speck of consciousness. So here, talking about this kind of stuff, there's a spiritual leader called Yogananda. He has a book, it's called Autobiography of a Yogi. Interesting book. But anyways, he talks about yoga and meditation as him going to the blissful state. No, he didn't say he becomes blissful. He says going to the blissful state. And it makes sense because we are spiritual. There is a soul in us or a spirit or whatever we want to call it. But there's something beyond the physical because once that something is no longer there, we become a flat body, right? We don't move anymore. There's no strength in this cognitive ability for us. Not cognitive. Can we use that word here? Cognitive. Uh, I don't think cognitive, but there's no strength in our ability anymore to kind of like inflict our intention and impose our intention on this body and allow this body to move. Once there is, once we're not able to come back from that state. Now he talks about the state of bliss. What if there are different states? What if our experience here on earth is really neutral ground? The way the Bible describes it, the way Muslims describe it. What if we are here neutral ground and everything when it comes to kind of like consciousness and ourselves, us that doesn't change, kind of lets go of our ego, does its thing, which is exactly what happens at night, right? Because you're no longer here, and then in the morning you're back. Or when I wake you up, or when somebody's waking you up, you're kind of forced to come back. You're not coming back on your own. And it's funny because like there's a certain engagement with how you actually deal with yourself that allows you to kind of see how reality kind of shifts towards these kind of engagements that you build day in and day out in order to be a person that deals, in order to shift this reality, or to be the person that deals with it in a much more efficient or effective way. Again, these are all choices. But overall, if I were to consider the spirit or the soul or the consciousness that's connected to me in this planet, I would kind of look at it from a way where every single time I work towards strengthening my bond with reality, I am also strengthening my bond with myself, because effectively what I'm doing is strengthening my intention towards this world, strengthening my approach towards this world, and strengthening my own prowess in this world. And then you could tell with athletes and how they kind of handle their body. Most of them, if they're not doping on like some random fucking drug, most of them are super calm in situations where they don't necessarily need to use these powers of theirs that they've been training all their life. And it only makes sense because Miyamoto Musashi talks about the way, and once you figure out the way, you can apply it anywhere you want. And it makes sense because now you're strong enough to handle being athletic. You can apply that strength anywhere. You're strong enough to be like a warrior, you can apply that strength everywhere. You're strong enough to be smart and an analyst, a consultant, an accountant. You're strong enough to be a carpenter, a welder, an artist, a painter. All these things, that strength is determined by you once you reach the goals where you're kind of looking at yourself. And so overall, our connection with our ego is how we build it towards achieving the things and how necessary it is. Because I really think there's more than one way to build yourself. But all of us would end up reaching at one understanding by the end. And it's a lot of appreciation for work, effort, concept, strength, all the things that had to go through in order for somebody to reach their goal or their destination. It becomes an appreciation. Why? Because you truly connect with the process because you went through it on your own terms towards your own things. And then when you meet people that are able to do that. And so consciousness is more of a string connecting us to this earth. And this string gets stronger if you are the one involved with your ego directly. And it gets weaker if it's the environment that's handling you. And I feel like our connection, us connection to the changes in our day become determined by how we approach our end goals and the ego that takes us from point A to point B. And maybe that makes more sense because when people say split whatever you have to do to smaller goals, it's because the you right now is not able to handle the big goal. So you need to kind of develop a different ego through smaller steps and exchange that those egotistical properties slowly, egoistical properties, slowly, until you develop kind of like a bigger understanding of whatever you wanted to achieve. And then the ego would have formed differently. And then you'll be able to take a different step forward. If we look at ourselves as buildable, it becomes a lot easier for us to destructure the process and to restructure the end results. Because ultimately, all you have to do is design. Like, I look at Tari as a guy that has a beard. Suddenly, I don't want to feel like shaving anymore. I look at Tari as a guy that has nails, and suddenly, I don't feel like biting my nails anymore. I look at Tari as the guy who cleans the house, who washes, who runs, who takes care of his family, his cats, who does all that stuff. And I'm not wrong. It's basically what will end up happening. And if I don't actually point them out, how would I know? Because myself is kind of like hidden in all of this. And I have to bring it out in order for whatever I'm building to listen and hear. Fun times. All right. The ego is buildable, guys. Later.